Good morning today. Good morning. I'll go to the Chitas of today. We're holding in the sixth reading of the portion of Boy. And we're holding on chapter 12, verse number 29. Vahi b'chatzi alayla was at midnight. Hashem he could go b'cher be'etz Mitzrayim. The Eibishter struck down every firstborn in the land of Egypt. And b'cher party from the king of Pharaoh, for the b'cher of Pharaoh. Hayeshal Akisi, which was sitting on a seat, and B'cher Hashevi, to the firstborn of the prisoner, Asher Beber, which is in the pit. B'chol B'cher Behemoth, every firstborn of every animal. Asher V'Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and God refers to him in his heavenly court, because V'Hashem, the concept of the addition, V'Hashem Pliny Upliny. So it's V'Hashem, the Vav adds somebody else. And that is the court of the heavenly court. Hiko Kol B'cher, Afshal Umma Cheres, even if somebody else, the nation was visiting Egypt, they were also the B'cher Pari. Hashem Pari too was the firstborn. But he alone remained alive out of all the firstborns. But about him, the verse says, nevertheless, I have spared you for this purpose, in order to show you my power. So Pharaoh ultimately survived all these situations. Why were the firstborn of prisoners punished? They were also killed because they rejoiced. That's what we see, people rejoicing with Israel's misfortune. And also that they not say, it is our deity who brought this punishment upon the Egyptians for imprisoning us. The maidservant's firstborn was also included in this description, but enumerates them with the greatest in stature of all to the smallest. And the maidservant's firstborn was the greater stature than the firstborn of a prisoner. So ultimately, every firstborn, whether it was Pharaoh's firstborn, the prisoner's firstborn, to the maid's firstborn, Yaakov Melech Mitzrayim, verse number 38. And Pari woke up in the night. Who of him and all his servants, Mitzrayim and all the Egypt. There was an unbelievable outcry by Mitzrayim in the whole land of Egypt. Because it was not a home that did not have a dead person. Yaakov Pari, Rashi says, Pari got out of his bed. A major accomplishment. Laila, because this was not the usual thing. Kings don't get out of bed until 3 hours in a day. Forget about it at night. Kings sleep 3 hours later in the day. Who, Tchila, first he got up. This teaches us that he himself went around to his courtier's house and made them get up. He got everybody up. He aimed by Sashain Shamesh, where there's no house, there's no house of dead. If there was a firstborn there, he died. If there was no firstborn there, the head of the household died. But he was also called B'cher. As it says, I too, for my part, I'll make him a great person, B'cher. So everybody, whether there was a B'cher or not a B'cher, somebody died. Another explanation, the Egyptian women were unfaithful to the husbands. And they bore children from unmarried men. And thus, they become firstborns. So there were firstborns to other people. Sometimes even 5 for one woman, each one being a firstborn to another father. So therefore, they could have had many firstborns. Moshe called Aaron, went to search for Aaron at night. He said, okay, it's time to go. You and the entire Jewish nation, Hashem, go and serve God, as you said. Rashi says he called tells Moshe and tell us that he made rounds in the entrance to the city, crying out, "Where's Moshe? Where's Aaron?" He couldn't find them. Gamatem, even the adults, Gamen Esau, even the children. Rashi says everything as you said, and not as I have said. Void of what it said, I will not send you Israel for you. Void is what I have said. Ask exactly what will bring. Void is I have voided everything. Now go. Everybody can go. Verse 32, most of your flock and your cattle. Who? Take, and go. Please bless me. Rashi says, what then did the Pharaoh add by saying, just as you stipulated? He's alluding to what Moshe said, you will also provide us feast. Take even my animals. As you said, take even mine. Please pray for me that I shouldn't die because I'm a firstborn. The Egyptians urged the people, hurrying them out of the land. Because they said, Kulanu Mason, we're all going to die. They said that the decree is not like Moshe Rabbeinu said, it's even worse. He said every firstborn will die. But here, even ordinary non-firstborn are dying. Everybody's dying. So we better get them out of here. The people took their dough before 11. With the leftover food wrapped in the cloth in their shoulders, they carried them out. Tell them because the Egyptians not let them long enough to rise. Leftovers of the matzah, the bitter herbs from the last night. Al shichmam, on their shoulders. Even though they took many animals with them, they preferred to carry these leftovers themselves because they cherished objects used for a commandment. They thus used it for a mitzvah. The mitzvah of sitting together at the Seder. When they saw also Moshe and the Jewish people did like Moshe Rabbeinu said, and they asked for the Egyptians gold, utensils, and clothing. But Moshe, he said to them, let them ask and borrow, each man from his friend. Smallest. What does that mean? This is even more valuable than them and silver and gold. Whatever is mentioned later in the verse is more important. So they walked out, took off their dirty garments and started to wear beautiful Egyptian garments. And the Eibishter granted the favor of the people in the eyes of the Egyptians. And they lent them everything they wanted. And they emptied out Egypt. Rashi says, they loaned them even what they were not asking for them. They gave to them. They gave them more than they asked for. You ask for one thing, there's two of them. Vayinatzu, Rashi says the Onkelos translates Vayinatzlu Vayirekenu. They emptied it out. And the Jewish people journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. These were a number of 600,000 besides the men on foot, besides the children, the women. Now she says, this was a distance of 120 mil. That's a lot of, it's a far way, but they reached in a short while. It says, I carried you on the wings of a griffin vulture. It took him very shortly to get 120 miles. Hagvarim, 20 years and above was 600,000. Verse 38, V'gam Erev Rav Ola Itam, and also a mixed multitude went up to them. They took themselves flock and great deal of livestock. Now it says, Erev Rav Taruvis Umashal Gadim. There's a mixture of people from other nations who became converts. Everybody suddenly wanted to convert and become Jewish. And they baked the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. Ugus matzahs, they made them into cake of matzah. Kiloi chometz, it could not rise. It didn't become leaven. Kigosh Mitzrayim, they were chased out of Mitzrayim. And they couldn't prepare anything. They didn't make any provisions for themselves on the way. Ash says the cakes of matzah dough had not risen is called matzah. Matzah means unleavened bread. That's basically what it means, matzah. God said for the journey. This tells us the praise of Jews. They did not say, how can we go out into the desert without food? But had faith in God and set out. This idea is expressed in the prophets. It says in Yirmiyahu where God says, I remember about your young loving kindness in your youth. I remember the days of your youth when you were young nation, and you showed your kindness, and you following me into the desert, into a land not sown. I asked you to walk into the desert, and all you marched into the desert. You had no provisions. Trust in God. In different neighbors, she says, Israel is a holy to God. And the time length that the Jewish people were in Egypt was 430 years. Now she says they lived in Egypt after the dwelling, that they dealt with strangers in lands that was not theirs. She says, as we made this calculation before, altogether for the time Isaac was born, was now 400 years. By the time Abraham had offsprings, with Sarah began the fulfillment of the prophecy, his descendants will be foreigners. And there were 30 years from when the decree was pronounced between the pieces. It's called the bris ben absarim, the bris, the covenant between the pieces, when Abraham split the animals, until Isaac was born. So there was a covenant that God did with Abraham, and he promised him a son, and he promised him a tzro, bris ben absarim, and that was 30 years before Isaac was born. And we start counting the Shibud of Galus from the time Isaac was born, 400 years. So that's why the Torah says 430 years. So really, 430 started from the time of the covenant between Abraham and God, which he told him, you're going to go into Egypt. For Kahas was among, and she proves it because Kahas was among those who came down to Egypt with Jacob. Go and add all his years of life, all the years of his son Amram, and the 80 years of his son Moses was then 80 years old. And you don't find that there's add up too much. And they don't add up to 430 years. Besides, you must concede that Kahas lived several years before he went down to Egypt. And many of Amram's years overlapped the years of Kahas. And many Moses' 80 years overlapped the years of Amram. Thus, you don't find 400 years since they entered Egypt. And you are forced to say that the patriarchs' other dwellings in the land of Canaan prior to their coming to Egypt is also considered Gators, foreign land. And even in Hebron, even though they lived in Hebron, it says where Abraham and Isaac sojourned, Gar. So even though it was their land, it was not their land totally. It also says the land of the Smigureim, which they sojourned. Therefore, you must say that the prophecy that your descendants will be foreign in the land began to fulfill immediately for the time Abraham had an offspring. So when you count from Abraham's offspring, Isaac, you have 400 years. You'll find that the arrival in Egypt until the departure was actually only 210 years. And this is one of the things that our sages changed with King Talmai. This is a famous story. Talmai HaMelech, it's the Gemara Megillah. Talmai HaMelech brought a bunch of 70 sages into the room and asked them to translate the Torah. And they all made the exact same differences, where they changed the 410 years to 210 years. And ultimately, even less than 210 years, because the Jewish people were not in slavery until the last of the brothers died, which is over 100 years later. Was the end of 430 years. Was in that day, the 15th day. Yatsu called Tzvais Hashem Mitzrayim. All the Jews left Mitzrayim. Now she says, this is to tell us that once the determined end of exile arrived, God did not detain him even much more than a blinking of an eye. Once it came to an end, it came to an end. There was no wasting of time. On the 15th of Nisan, the ministering angels visited Abraham to inform him that Sarah would bear his son. On the 15th of Nisan, he was born. On the 15th of Nisan, 400 years exactly later, on 430, the 15th of Nisan, between the pieces pronounced. So everything happened on the 15th of Nisan. The 15th of Nisan was the Bisman of Sodom, which started 430 years. On the 15th of Nisan, God told Abraham through the prophet, through the angels, that he's going to have a son a year later. On the 15th of Nisan, he was born, and that started clicking the time for 400 years. And 400 years later, exactly on the 15th of Nisan, the Jewish people left Mitzrayim on the 2nd. Hatzei Sayim, midday of the 15th day, they were all gone. And therefore, Leil Shemurim Hula Hashem Eleitzim Mitzrayim, this night, the night of the 14th, is a night of expectation. Leitzim Eretz Mitzrayim, to take them out of Egypt. Hu Alayla Hazeh. This is this night, La Hashem, to God, Shmurim L'Chol Bnei Yisrael. It's a night of watching throughout their generation. Ashi says, for the Holy One, blessed be He, was waiting and looking to fulfill the promise to take them out of Egypt. Hu Alayla Hazeh. It is this night which God said to Abraham, on this night I'll redeem your descendants. Shmurim hein l'chol l'seichel, says, but then and onwards, it's continuously protected from all destructive forces. The 14th night, the Seder night, is called Leil Shemurim. God protects over Jews on that night. And He will not allow the destructive plagues to enter the house, not only the night of Pesach, but all Pesach nights throughout history. Verse 43, Vayem Hashem Moshe, and God said to Moshe about it, this is the laws of the Passover sacrifice. But no non-Jew is allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. Now she says, this passage is said on the 14th of Nisan, Kol ben Necha, which means one who acts as an alien to his father in heaven, and applies both a non-Jew and apostate of Israel. Now both of these people are not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. Verse 44, if you have a non-Jewish slave that works for you, if he's a man, you have to make sure he's circumcised. But since he's a slave, he's allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. Even though he's not Jewish, but if he's a slave, you're obligated to feed him. So he can eat from the Korban Pesach. Ash says his master may eat from it. This tells us that failing to perform circumcision on one's bondsman prevents one from eating Korban Pesach. So if you have a servant that's a Jew, that's a guy, you have to circumcise him. That's what Torah says by circumcision, that every Jewish slave need to be circumcised. If you don't circumcise him, then he cannot eat from the Korban, and the master cannot eat from it. This opinion is Rabbi Yeshua, but Rabbi Lezer says failing to perform circumcision in one's body will not prevent one from eating Korban Pesach. So what does the Torah mean? He may eat of it. And only then the bond himself may eat it, not that the master can eat of it. Oz Yechal Bey is not going on the master, it's going on the servant. So the servant, even though he's a Jewish servant, if he's not circumcised, he cannot eat the Korban Pesach. Verse 45, anybody who's neither a resident alien nor a non-Jewish hired laborer, not a servant, may eat for them. Taishav, this is a foreigner that lives in the Jewish people. It's called a Ger Taishav. So there are those who can live in the land of Israel. They're not Jews. But they're called a Ger Taishav. They're not allowed to worship idols. Certain laws upon them. But they can be non-Jews living in the land of Israel. And that's fine. But they cannot eat for the Korban Pesach. The Sacher, so too a worker of you. If you have a worker, not a slave, but a worker by a day worker or a night worker, so they are not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. And why does Torah say this? Are not residents, aliens, and non-Jews uncircumcised? And it says no uncircumcised may eat of it. Rather, it's referring, for example, a circumcised Arab or a circumcised Gibeonite. They circumcise their children. Arabs do that. They circumcise at the age of 13. So you might think, oh, he's circumcised, so therefore he's allowed to have the korban. Comes the pasuk and tells no. If he's the non-Jew, then he cannot. Unless he's a servant, then he can. Verse 46, you have to eat it in one house. They say to him in Abayis, you can't take the food out of the house. For the flesh of the korban. You're not allowed to break any of its bones. Now she says, first of all, in one house, meaning in one group. I mentioned this before, that the Korban Pesach was established in the group. So the group has to stay there, meaning those designated to the group for eating, it should not later become two groups and divided. As it says, Babai Yisecha means one group. Perhaps the meaning is none other than one house in the plain sense, and it comes to teach us that if the group began to eating in the Passover sacrifice in the yard of the house, and it started to raining, that they can enter the house and continue eating. Therefore, the Torah says the house where they'll eat the sacrifice, for which we may deduce that those who eat the sacrifice may eat it in two places. It has to be one group. It could be in two places, in the yard, in the house, but it gotta be one group. Torah obligates the Korban Pesach to be on the group. They say to an abayis, which means not for the house, but for the group. As we said, the Gemara learns it means for the group. You're not allowed to break a bone. This refers to a bone that is fit to be eaten, such as one that has a kazayas of more of flesh on it. Only it does the prohibition of breaking a bone apply. But to a bone that doesn't have any kazayas of flesh upon it, the prohibition of breaking the bone does not apply. So it's going on the concept that this flesh upon that bone, you're not allowed to break the bone. Kol Adas Yisrael Yasu, he said, the entire Jewish community shall offer it. Rashi says, Lama Nema. What is the meaning of the statement? Since regarding the Passover sacrifice offering in Egypt, it says a lamb per paternal family, meaning that they registered for eating it only by family groups. I might think that the Passover sacrifice offered up in a future generation must also be so. Therefore, it states the entire community Israel will offer it. So that there was only that it was only on the Passover of the Korban Pesach of Mitzrayim. If a convert lives amongst you, also Pesach Hashem, and he's going to make a sacrifice of Pesach. First of all, he has to make sure that all his children are circumcised. Then he can make the Korban Pesach. He comes like the rest of the Jewish people. The main thing is that an uncircumcised person cannot eat for this Korban. She says, from these words alone, I might have thought that who converts must also offer the Passover sacrifice immediately upon conversion. Therefore, the Torah says he must be like the native of the land. It doesn't make a difference when you convert. If you converted a month before Pesach, you have to wait for Pesach to eat the Korban Pesach. You can't say, "Oh, I haven't eaten the Korban Pesach the last 10 years. Let me go and make a Korban." You can't do that. Just as a native offer the Passover sacrifice on the 14th of Nisan, so too a convert offers it up on the 14th of Nisan. They can't decide to do it before that. We said already that an uncircumcised person cannot eat it. Why did Torah say it again? So Rashi says this prohibition is written to include one whose older brother died or is about to undergo circumcision, who is therefore not considered an apostate by virtue of being uncircumcised. And therefore, this law cannot be derived from no stranger may eat them. There's a concept, let's say a person, actually it's I think two children. If you have one son that dies, God forbid, after circumcising, then it happens to the second son, he dies. So seemingly these children come from this situation, this wife is dangerous to circumcise them. They'll die, and therefore they're not allowed to be circumcised. You can't circumcise this next child. For simply danger, maybe the circumcision is killing them. So therefore, we're not talking about such a child. We're talking about a child who could be circumcised and not circumcised. There's one law for you, for the Jew that lives in Israel, and for the Jew that converts and becomes part of the Jewish nation. Hashem, this verse is to adequate the convert with the native of the Jew regarding all other commandments of the Torah. That a person that converts, once he converts, he becomes like any other Jew. There's no difference in him and another Jew is obligated in all Torah mitzvahs. Yasu came in Esau, Kashiv Hashem es Moshe, and the Jewish people did like Moshe Rabbeinu commanded them. Cain also, this is what they did. Verse 51, Vahi B'Tamei Mazeh happened in the middle of this day. Yatsu. Haitzi Hashem is Bnei Esau. The Abishah took the Jewish people out. Meretz Mitzrayim from the land of Egypt. Al Tivesam on the legions. And that completes the Chumash for today. Now we go to the 19th chapter of Tanya. Previous chapters, Alter Rebbe began to discuss the hidden love of God inherited by every Jew, by virtue in which they're indeed near to, and therefore automatically that creates a concept of nearness of them to God, that every person is near to God. There's no person that's far distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everybody's near because everybody has an neshama. So he stated that the love originates in the divine soul faculty of Chachma, where the light of the Ein Sof is vested in Chachma and wisdom. Explain where this all comes from. It all comes from one's wisdom. And that is that this love, which causes every Jew to choose death rather than to break the faith of God. It was further explained the divine soul, and thus also the love of God is instinct to it. Is every Jew's inheritance from the patriarchs who merited to bequeath to the descendants eternally. Thus, there are 4 questions raised in the previous chapter concerning the hidden love. 2 have been answered. What is the root of this love? And how does it come inherited? Because they were a Merkava, they were totally subservient to God. 2 questions remain. What's the nature of this love? What does it strive for? And how is fear of God incorporated in it? And now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us what is the nature of this love, and how does the concept of God, fear of God, incorporate in this love. Taisus beers to further elucidate the nature of this hidden love. We need to first explain the meaning of the verse. Neid Hashem nishmas adam. The soul of man, his neshama, is a candle of God. Pirush, what's the meaning? Shisol hakrim adam, the Jewish people who called man. As the Gemara says, Atem kruyim adam. You are called man, Adam. Many meanings to that. Meaning you're Adam. The Adam, one of the meanings is the Adam is singular. There's no plural for Adam. There are many names to man. Adam, Ish, Gever, Enish. But Adam, the only name that is singular is Adam. Adam, you don't say Adamim. There's no plural for the word Adam. So you Atem, Kruyim Adam, you are called Adam, Nishmasam, Hilamasha, Knera, Adam. The Shamar of Adam, of mankind, humanity, is like a fire, a flame of a candle. You look at a candle and it has a flame upon it, you'll realize the nature of this candle, of this flame, is that it keeps on going backwards and forwards. It's in constant motion. And what is its motion? Its motion is to go above. It wants to leave the wick. It wants to go above. The nature of the flame is to go above. Why? The Eibishter made this in the intrinsically essence of the flame. It seeks to part from the wick. It wants to return to the source of this flame. Where is the source of the flame? You say the Aish. The source of the flame is in the universal element of fire, Hakalali, general power of fire. Where does fire come from? Shetachas Galgal Yerech, that's which is the lunar sphere, which its claim as brought down in Kabbalah. So the four elements of earth, water, air, and fire are so positioned that the higher and the more ethereal elements surround and encompass the lower coarsest element. So earth is the coarsest of all elements. It is therefore physically the lowest. Water is the next highest element. Should be right, surround and be located above the earth. It's only because God's kindness that the earth is above the waters. Thank God we can live. As is written, we say in davening, He spreads the earth over the waters. For His kindness is everlasting, and He makes sure that the water does not overflow the earth, even though the majority of the earth is water. The Eibishter made that the earth should always be above the water. Baruch Hashem. And the element of air is higher than water, and therefore surrounds it. Fire is the highest element, surrounds the entire atmosphere, and is found in the subliminal spheres. The flame, constant drawn towards dust, represents its desire to unite with the source of fire. Now, if the flame would leave the wick, which it does, and it returns to its source, what happens? Even though when it returns to its source, it has lost its identity. It has become part of the source, and now it doesn't shine anymore in this world. So here, this flame was shining in this world, and it wanted to leave the world, even though, in essence, by leaving the world, it lost its beauty, it lost its shine. The you might say, oh, but maybe he finds a beauty in its source. Ultimately, this flame has lost its identity in the source, and the source has totally taken over him, and he's not seen anymore. So it would cease to luminary. It would cease to be an luminary. For since the candle is ineffective in the illumination in its environment, when surrounded by overwhelming great brilliance of daylight, surely within the element of fire itself, its identity is completely null. Take the candle, you put it in the light, in the sunlight, what is worth the candle? It has no value. In the sun itself, it's nothing. It doesn't have a value. It's basically not there, even though it is there. So the flame striving to unite with the source cannot, therefore, be considered constructed as seeking a higher form of existence. Furthermore, this desire for unification with its source, which can be achieved only through self-annihilation, defies the axiom that everything exists everything exists being desired its continued existence. Every concept wants survival. That's one of its basic DNA, that it wants survival. It wants to always stay in existence. Here, the candle is willing to give up its existence. Logically, then, the flame ought to not draw upward to its source. The flame should want to stay right here. That's not the way the flame is. The flame wants to, in essence, nullify itself, destroy itself, to be part of true existence, and to lose its own existence. That is where you see the power of the supernatural, that even in the flame itself has a desire to go above itself. It's like the lesson we learned last week's parsha when the Tzvadeya jumped into the ovens. That's not the nature of even an animal to jump into fire. It's going to annihilate itself by jumping into fire. And even animals comprehend that when there's fire, they got to run the other way. So here the flame wants to return to its source, where in its source, it's going to be totally non-existent. Not that it's going to be there, but not seen. That's like you take a candle and put it into under the sun. It's there, it has no value because the sun gives all the light. I don't need this candle anymore. But over here, the candle going to its source is nullified, is annihilated, as you use the word over here. Annihilated, it's not there anymore. It has become the source, and now it has nothing. It's never, like it's not, it is not there. So Eibishter showed something in nature that's not usual in nature. Because the Eibishter created everything a yesh. The Eibishter created everything into its existence. And the second God created everything in existence, everything wants existence. Everything in the world wants existence. Because God gave him that concept of existence. Once God gave us the taste of existence, so to say, that we exist, now everybody wants to exist. But the Eibishter put in fire an unbelievable character that it wants to go out of existence. Its desire for its source is so big that it's willing to give up of self. It's willing to go out of its own existence. Nevertheless, that's the desire of his nature. It constantly strains upward as though this was a conscious desire. Pasha, the fire shows the only thing that's keeping him down here is this wick and this oil. If you take away the wick, you take away the oil, it's going to be consumed. It's going to jump away from this place. So when the Torah says, Kinei Hashem Nishmas Adam, the Torah is in essence telling us that the neshama has the exact same DNA. My neshama is like a fire, like a simple candle. Kach nishmasad, that's what the pasuk means. So to the neshama of a Jew, and also his level of ruach and nefesh, it's all it wants to do is cleave to God. It doesn't care that by connecting to God it'll lose itself. It doesn't care. He wants, the neshama wants to be part of God. It's willing to give up everything. It's willing to give up existence. It has no interest in self. So though the verse states the neshama of man is the candle of God, you might say only maybe the higher level of the neshama. This comparison is not limited to one through the higher level of soul. Neshama is actively revealed. The word neshama is used here as a broad sense of soul. It means all levels of the soul, which includes the level of ruach and nefesh, which is two lower levels of the soul. Thus, the analogy of a candle extended to those within whom only lower level of ruach neshama is revealed. So everyone's soul doesn't make a difference if he's a genius, he's a Talmid Chacham, or Rasha. That in mamish his soul, he has a nefesh of the soul in himself. Doesn't make a difference. His neshama, like the neshama of the tzaddik, have the equal purpose and the equal agenda. It wants to cleave to godliness. Chefze, sheka, the soul naturally desires and yearns bitiva from its nature. Lipared, to leave. It wants to leave. V'latzis min haguf. It wants to have an outer body experience. L'dafka b'shash b'keira. And it wants to cleave to its source and its place. Ba'Hashem chaya chayim baruch hu. It wants to cleave to God. That's all the neshama wants. It wants the concept of going out of the body and leaving and having a journey to its source. So the soul, whose essence life is thus especially drawn to God, the source of all life, and it desires to sever its connection with the body, which hinders its ability to become one with God. Even though the soul knows, soul has Chabad, the soul has knowledge, and the soul knows Shetia Ayim ve'efes. The second it to return to its source, it's going to become null and not. With this battle sham, it's going to become totally nullified. It'll lose its identity. It's completely nullified, and nothing at all will remain. That's specifically for its original essence and stuff. We're going to learn later that that's why the Eibusher gave us mitzvahs, which protect the neshama from this. That's why, again, the Alter Rebbe calls mitzvahs in Torah the concept of levushim, the garments. They're protecting garments. They have a purpose in this world, and they have a purpose in the upper world. They protect us. That's why the mitzvah, that's why the expression is, what you go up to heaven with? Your mitzvahs. All the physical things you have acquired stay here. But in the what goes to heaven, Baruch Hashem, your mitzvahs go with you. They're levushim. So they protect you for this concept in a way that the neshama should not lose its identity. But really, the neshama itself wants to lose its identity. This is the natural desire of the soul. That's why the Gemara says, when the neshama comes into the body, he doesn't want to come into the body. That's why a child, the Gemara says, is born crying. He doesn't want to come into this body. He wants to be part of God. Why wouldn't he want to come into the body? Then he realizes, as he comes into the body, the greatness of the body. Then he doesn't want to leave the body. He realizes that every mitzvah that he has, he realizes he's not going to lose his connection to God. Actually, the mitzvahs are going to help him out to have a great identity with God. Because the mitzvah is a part of God. It's a ratzon of the Eibusher. It's a ratzon in the will of God, the wisdom of God. So therefore, there's nothing better than a mitzvah to the neshama. Even if it's a physical mitzvah, there's nothing better to the mitzvah than the neshama, than anything. Not only in this world, but even in the upper world, because now the neshama goes back l'mayla with mitzvahs. That's the only thing it takes. The Torah that he learned, and the mitzvahs that he did. So he comes l'mayla, malayim mitzvahs kirivin, full of mitzvahs like a ribim, baruch Hashem, like a pomegranate. And these mitzvahs give him l'mayla something that he would never have received if he didn't come here in this world and do this mitzvah. But what's the nature? That's why the neshama drags everything l'mayla, because the nature of the neshama is to go l'mayla, is to go above. That's the nature of every neshama. So note the expression with nothing at all remaining of its original self, unity with its source would not cause the soul to cease to exist. On the contrary, this is the soul's true uniqueness. However, in this state, the soul ceases to exist as it exists while clothed in the body, a distinctive entity, with its own intellect and emotion powers and so on. Therefore, it cannot be postulated that the soul's yearning to unite with its essence merely represents a desire of self-elevation. For self-elevation is possible only where the original self remains. For example, a person may well strive to be a better himself, become wiser, stronger, but he can't strive to become something which is not himself, like an angel. Why then should a soul desire to leave the body and unite with its source, since this union causes the cessation of the original self? He's not anymore a human being. Indeed, there's no rational explanation for this desire. Right? Because that's why the soul cries. Why would the soul want to leave the body? And the soul, that's why it's brought down. The soul, that 11 months, that's the whole concept of 11 months. The soul is like mixed up. Like, what is its purpose? soul, body. It comes in his own, but it has a desire. Ultimately, it drags him. The desire drags him above. The innate desire, which he doesn't comprehend. Why would he have such a desire? It's better one mitzvah in this world than all the world to come. So he's like dragged back to the world. He says, what am I doing in heaven? I belong in the world. I can do another mitzvah. I should be doing another mitzvah. But ultimately, the beauty of the upper worlds drags him to higher situations. And therefore, after a certain amount of time, the neshama becomes part of the upper world. Especially the Gemara forgets this entire world. And the Eibush just sends him down on a yard site or whatever. Or you can go to the person's graveyard and wake him up, so to say. Saying you're going to do a good deed for him. Wakes him up. The term nature is usually used derogatorily in the sense that it denotes irrationality. A phenomena lacking any rational basis is usually described that that's the nature. In our case, however, the term is used complementary, as described as soul's super-rational desire. The soul has a super-rational, natural desire to go above. The soul, that's why it's brought down, when it comes to Kedusha, Mailim B'Kodesh, you have to go higher. Because that's the nature of Kedusha. And my soul is holy. And therefore, it naturally wants to go higher. It might not even know why it wants to go higher, but that's its nature. It sees the beauty of the lower. It came down to the world to go to the lowest and to elevate everything, but its nature is to go above. It constantly wants to go higher. Nature, that's its nature, is implied terms to anything that is not the realm of reason and comprehend. That's its nature. Why does a lion eat sheep and a cow eat hay? That's its nature. That means it's not comprehensible. That's what the Rambam writes. When Mashiach, it says when Mashiach comes that the lion will eat wheat. The Rambam feels that is not reality. That's just an analogy. That the lion, when Mashiach comes, will eat meat. No, the lion will eat the hay. The lion will continue to eat meat, that Rambam holds. It's just giving you a concept that the transformation will be like a lion that will suddenly eat hay. Lions eat meat, cows eat hay. That's its nature. Why? Because that's what the Eibush created it. That's how God created it. So too, the neshama is like a candle that wants to connect to its source. That's its nature. Why? It's because God created it. Just like God created a candle to go above, so too God created my neshama to go above. So now I've just learned an important concept in my neshama. The DNA, the nature of my soul. My soul, so to everyone's soul, wants always to go better. That is the DNA of my neshama. It always wants to go higher. It's never happy with yesterday's service. It's never happy with a minute ago's avodah. It doesn't. It's wonderful. It wants to go better. So that's why the expression is mitzvah geredas mitzvah. One mitzvah will automatically, because that's the DNA of a neshama. The second you do a mitzvah, you completed it, the neshama wants another mitzvah. He's not satisfied. He wants another mitzvah. And so on and so forth. It's never ending. He never ending. So therefore, you're going to do 100 mitzvahs. He wants 101 mitzvahs. It constantly wants to go higher. That's your DNA of a neshama. And in essence, by doing the opposite, you're going against your nature of your soul. By laying around and doing nothing, that's the opposite of your neshama. The neshama wants to always go higher. It always wants to go better. There's no rest to this neshama. Not in this world, and not in the world to come. Because your neshama has a natural drive. He has a natural drive to go higher. And here too, regarding the soul's desire to unite with its source, the inference of the word nature, this soul's will and desire is not based on reasoning. When you say that this is its nature, again, you're saying that not it makes sense per se why its nature is this way. That's the way the Eibishter created the neshama. This is above understanding. Why everyone has a soul that it wants to go higher and higher, that is something that is in the natural DNA of this neshama. And going back, circling back, now I'm going to circle back. Where is this found in the neshama itself? That is the wisdom of the soul. That's its wisdom. When you ask what is the wisdom of this neshama, to go higher, because in chachma of this neshama there's Ein Sof, and therefore there's no limit to high. There's no limit to how high this neshama can get. It's limitless. Chachma is limitless. Soul is limitless. And therefore it continues, as I said, whether it's in this world, whether it's in the upper worlds, the neshama continues to journey higher and higher. So chachma is a factor that transcends comprehension, a factor that we're in light of Ein Sof abides. As a result, the soul is drawn to the source of Ein Sof with a longing beyond comprehension. And that's the beauty of every Jew. That doesn't make a difference who he is, what level he is, how smart he is, how not smart he is, how learned he is, how holy he is. Doesn't make a difference. Every Jew has a neshama. And every Jewish neshama wants to go high, wants to be better, wants to be more loving, wants more godliness. That's the desire of the souls. That's the push. Nothing you do, you can't stop it. You can't even stop this concept. It's above rationalization. You can rationalize and stop something. This is above rational. Doesn't make any sense. Why this neshama continues to want more and more, why this neshama is searching for godliness? You cannot ask the question. The question would make it sound like it's a rational reason. Second, you ask the question, there's a rational to it. You want an answer. You can't ask the question on this desire. Thus, we see that the nature of the hidden love, meaning the quest, its longing of the soul to be united with its source, is unlimited. And the Alter Rebbe goes explain on the designation of this hidden love, because ultimately this chachma brings to ava, as we learned before. Chachma brings to ava, the first attribute in a human being. Ava, chesed, ava. So now we're going to go to ava. We're going to go to the next concept. Once a person realizes that he has an neshama that's above and beyond, that his neshama has a yearning, a natural yearning above understanding, now we can come to understanding, because he has to come to ava. Now we can bring this concept a little bit into comprehension. And the ava that this is going to create, the love of God that this is going to create. But here the chita stops. You'll have to continue tomorrow on your own. Today is the second day of the month, which is chapter in Tillim. It's chapter 10 to chapter 17. If you do those 7 chapters, you do the chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes in Hayom Yom, the Rebbe says, the name of the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, my father related the Rebbe, the previous Lubavitch, saying that his father related the Maim of Vayera Shmi Hashem, Lo Nidaiti Lehem, discusses the idea that none of them will be repelled. Not the Maimer, which is entitled as printed Perer, acquired the name, the Fruma, the God-fearing Vayera. So the Alter Rebbe said a Maimer in this pasuk Vayera. That year was Pashas Vayera. The Alter Rebbe said a Maimer on that pasuk Vayera Hashem, Vayera Avos, that ultimately the Eibishter revealed himself to the patriarchs. The Alter Rebbe repeated this Maimer every 3 years, each time verbatim. He almost said the Maimer word for word. Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, said that every time that he heard the Maimer from the Alter Rebbe, was like a new oir, like a new light to him. My father, the Rebbe Rashab, commented, oir, light, is always the same. Oir is always the same. But Ma'or, the luminary, is always like something new. So we have, just introduced to you right now to Oir and Ma'or, the light and the illuminary. Light is light. It's always something that comes from something else. When something comes from something else, so it's old. The illuminary is always new. It's always new. That's why the concept of Chachma is always new. Bina could be old. Chachma is always new. There's no thing in Chachma that is old, because Chachma is connected to Ein Sof, to the Ma'or. Chachma is the illuminary, this analogy, and the luminary is always new. And that's why the Gemara says, Yibenech Hadoshim, that the Torah should always be like something new to you. It's not something you learn old. So that's what the Tzemach Tzedek said. I heard the Maimer from the Alter Rebbe many times, and every time he said the Maimer verbatim. He said the Maimer, he said the discourse over and over, the same words. But the Tzemach Tzedek said, nah, there's something new. Every time I heard of something new. It was never old, because it's Chachma. Ma'or, it's the illuminary. Not the it's the illuminary. The luminary is always new. God is always new. The Torah is always new. The neshama is always new. You don't have an old neshama. You have a new neshama every day. That's why you say Maidani every single day. I wish you all a wonderful, beautiful day. I wish you all a beautiful Shabbos. I hope you learn Chitas tomorrow by yourselves, wherever you are. And Amit Shem will come together on Sunday again to begin the new Parsha, Parsha B'Shalach. We're going out of Egypt, and they'll learn the Chitas of the day. I wish you all a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos, and have a wonderful day.